censorship, criminal prosecution, ban on criticizing the authorities. On the eve of the presidential elections, Moldova has gathered a full bouquet of the European vector. Even human rights activists are dizzy from its aromas. They stated that the campaign is taking place under unequal conditions. Today we'll figure out what's happening in pre-election Chisinau and what scandals have already surrounded President Sandu. Ahead is also a referendum on Moldova's entry into the European family. We provide only facts, you draw conclusions.
Fear. True animal fear.
Eleven candidates are running for the presidency. However, only 2 have a real chance of winning. Former Moldovan prosecutor Alexander Stoianoglo and of course Maya Sandu. The latter is shaking, both literally and figuratively.
Wow! Something interesting is happening here. It's our premiere of an earthquake live on air.
Apparently, that TV appearance impressed Sandu so much that she refused to participate in the debates she was officially announced for and agreed to attend.
I have no questions from Mr. Usati or other candidates.
I wanted it to be a constructive discussion with the ruling representatives.
I have many questions, and I was ready to respond to the accusations made against me by the current government and Mrs. Sandu. In this situation, I will leave this hall and not participate in these debates.
Why did she announce then? Her opponent simply left the debates, stating, "I have no questions for others." No questions.
At the last stage, practically stripping us to our underwear, believe me, they will come for our underwear too. No wonder the EU ambassador in Moldova said that ruling politicians should not twitch and resist, as it will only get worse for them. Western curators will come for our lands.
For Moldova. That's Maya Sandu's slogan. The president is running for a second term from the Action and Solidarity Party. The main trump card of her political opponents is her Romanian citizenship. Yes, it turns out that's possible. For Chisinau, it's a painful issue, as discussions about becoming part of the Big Brother continue year after year. But Bucharest acts a bit more cunningly.
Romanian Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu announced that Bucharest intends to buy the only Moldovan seaport, Giurgiu-Lești. The head of the Romanian government emphasizes that negotiations about the port are not with Moldovan officials, but with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which has been the sole shareholder of Giurgiu-Lești since 2021. Bucharest's expansion is noted in other areas as well. In September, the Moldovan gas transportation system came under the control of the Romanian company Transgaz. Officially, the procedure was linked to Chisinau, fulfilling its obligations under the so-called EU Third Energy Package, which involves separating supply, transportation, and distribution in the gas market.
The material is still from the end of 2023. And note how under the EU banner, another country is simply buying up Moldova's major assets. And Sandu is facilitating this.
The newspaper Moldovan News writes that Romania behaves as if Moldova were one of its counties and continues. It can be assumed that the current Moldovan authorities will be helped to achieve their goals, as about 1 million residents of our country are Romanian citizens.
Meanwhile, Sandu is a strong supporter of the country's accession to the European Union and seems ready to do a lot for it.
European media report on Brussels' plans to create deportation camps for illegal migrants in candidate countries for membership by 2025. It is reported that such points may appear in Albania and Moldova.
The European Union imposes a bunch of demands on us. A bunch of demands. Political claims, a bunch of laws and so on, which are very difficult for Moldova to fulfill, and which hit very hard on the economy, social sphere, demography, and all other key areas. let's move on. Bucharest's hand is evident in other Sandu's affairs. Thus, the Romanian Supreme Council of National Defense takes control of the electoral process in Chisinau and other cities at the request of Moldova's ruling circles.
If Moldova changes its geopolitical direction, it will pose a direct threat not only to Ukraine, but also to Romania, explained Bucharest's interest in the situation in the neighboring country, former Moldovan Deputy Prime Minister Vladislav Kolminsky. The presidential elections scheduled for October 20th are attracting increased interest in the West.
And of course, corruption. Sandu came to the presidential chair as a fierce fighter against this scourge. However, back in 2014, holding a government position, she seems to have helped steal $1 billion from Moldova. Her opponents are sure.
The amount stolen from Moldovan banks under the guise of European integration amounted to 18% of the country's GDP. For this scheme, the legislation was changed. As a result, in 2014, $1 billion disappeared from the country's 3 main banks. The money was allegedly withdrawn to cover expenses for joining the EU. In reality, they went to the UK and Hong Kong. To hide the theft, on the eve of the parliamentary elections of the same year, the government issued loans to banks. As a result, the Moldovan leu depreciated by 50% in one day.
Maia Sandu strongly supported the allocation of loans and voted for. The evil media, which are, of course, called Kremlin-backed in Moldova, write that even in the billion, there is a peace for the honest president of Moldova.
Everyone knew perfectly well, everything was openly transferred, no one was proven, and practically nothing was done in this regard. And then, the then acting government, the parliament, again it was a pro-European parliament, made a wise decision that the state budget would return this money over a certain period, which is happening today. Some stole, and the whole nation is returning this money.
By the way, about the media, Chisinau denied accreditation to several Russian media, so they won't be able to cover the elections. Officially, they do not meet the requirements. In fact, we understand that extra eyes are not needed there. Blocking channels threatening sovereignty is also in place. Such a pro-European president.
This is what true animal fear looks like. Moldovan parliament member Marina Tauber commented on the blocking of opposition leaders and media pages in the country. According to her, the authorities feel their weakness, so they use the dirtiest and most crude ways to silence the opposition. And there are more and more arrests and detentions of those who defend freedom of speech in the country.
And can we know, ladies and gentlemen, what law we violated? That telling the truth in Moldova is now forbidden? It's a pity that in their blind rage they don't understand. Even if you cut off the internet across the country, you won't be able to change our citizens' opinion about your harmful policies.
Agitation in Moldova also follows its own rules. The TV and Radio Council banned criticizing the authorities in pre-election videos and beyond.
Moreover, the phrase "I advocate for banning LGBT propaganda in schools" was banned in the videos. The STR stated that this is incitement to discrimination based on sexual orientation.
Voting abroad is another feature of the elections. Democratic math for Russia. There, only 5 polling stations will be opened for 700,000 voters.
The Moldovan diaspora in Russia is over 1 million people, and we have already shown our desire to participate in the voting. There are almost 700,000 Moldovan voters in Russia. People are determined for Moldova to undergo radical changes and become a prosperous country. But it turns out there are 140,000 voters per station. It's unrealistic, simply because a maximum of 5,000 ballots can be issued.
Alexander Stoianoglo is also an interesting figure. The prosecutor general was nicknamed the political joker, and in 2021 he was placed under house arrest and faced 5 criminal cases. Maia Sandu tried to imprison him.
Stoianoglo was also involved in the billion theft. However, all threads lead to Moldovan oligarch Vladimir Plahotniuc. Nevertheless, the ex-prosecutor managed to prove his innocence and moved into political action.
As a result, Stoianoglo is the single candidate from the Moldovan opposition. His candidacy was also supported by former President Igor Dodon. It turns out that the former prosecutor is today the only hope for Moldova to remain on, quote, a balanced foreign policy path. In simpler terms, to maintain relations with Belarus and Russia.
how can I say he is a brave person, an honest person? Yes, he has pro-European views, but he is for normal strategic relations with Russia, with Belarus. He is for opening, how can I say, both Russian, Moldovan, and Belarusian markets, respectively. Yes. He is for normal visa-free travel, for normal trade, for normal relations, yes, for neutrality. The Republic of Moldova, military political, yes, he is extremely negative about sanctions. As far as I understand the situation, he has a poor opinion of these sanctions against Russia or Belarus, because they primarily harmed the Republic of Moldova.
And here we need to remember another force that was simply banned from participating in the election campaign. It's about the Victory Party. It was its supporters who shook Moldova with protests last year. Protests about everyday issues against corruption, economic woes, and severing ties with Russia. The leader of the political bloc, Ilan Shor, was eventually declared wanted by Chisinau, and the CEC banned any actions on the country's territory.
It's not surprising, as the Moldovan Central Election Commission's website lists these sponsors of the organization. USAID, whose money is behind almost every color revolution. The UK, the British twin brother, and finally, the US Embassy in the UK and the UN Human Rights Department.
You go to the Moldovan CEC website and there are the British Embassy European funds and American ones, including the notorious USAID, a promoter of pro-American ideas spreading its tentacles worldwide. Formally, these are the site's sponsors. All those who are keenly interested in Moldova becoming another military base and province of the West.
And where such funds roam, NATO is there too. You see, the scenario is very similar. And now they are talking about the possibility of deploying American F-16s on the country's military airfields. And of course, Transnistria. There, with Ukraine's prompting, the situation is being inflamed day by day. After the start of the special military operation, Moldova remained the only window to the world for the region. All exports go through Chisinau, and Sandu is literally strangling the republic.
Transnistrian entrepreneurs pay export duties. The republic's enterprises incur costs of $260,000 to $300,000 per month, or about $3.5 million per year. Finally, Moldova blocks the accounts of Transnistrian companies and prevents the import of several goods, including medicines, into Transnistria.
Price increases and constant inflation are Moldova's constant companions under Sandu. Passenger transport has risen by 20% over the past year, and water supply by almost 25%. The number of Moldovans living on the brink of poverty has recently increased by 6% and exceeded 31%, meaning every third person is left with nothing. No wonder people are increasingly taking to the streets.
People gathered just to show the authorities is fed up. Because of it, essentially, the people of Moldova, without wanting it, were left with nothing. The current government's fixed idea is to finally leave the CIS and sever all ties with Russia. At the same time, no one plans to take them into the European Union anytime soon. So it turns out they lost benefits from Russia, but got nothing substantial from the EU, except for military scrap.
Moldovans didn't see rivers of milk and honey, although Sandu promised a lot in her last campaign's program.
As stated in the program, Sandu pledges to promote the fulfillment of 5 national goals. The first on this list is justice, order, and discipline. Supposedly, all villains will be punished and their property confiscated. A kind of Robin Hood with a Romanian passport. As you understand, things only got worse. What happened to Moldova's judicial system, frankly, is hard to look at without tears. The unwanted were indeed punished, sent to prison, or if luckier, into retirement. Their positions were filled by their own people. It's hard not to recall the high-profile case of Prosecutor General Alexander Stoianoglo, accused of all mortal sins.
Moldova is approaching a demographic catastrophe, but the authorities don't notice the problem. The leader of the Chance Party calls Moldova a country disappearing before our eyes.
The deepest economic crisis, poverty, unemployment, and lack of prospects, while Sandu and PAS are at the helm, force Moldovans to leave their homes. Only 1 in 10 who left plans to return home. And this is another stroke to the grim image of our country on the international stage, which the criminal and subversive activities of the PAS government have led to over several years.
It's hard for Moldovan farmers too. They are tired of the authorities' indifference and have been protesting for 2 years. The country's main industry is on the brink of collapse.
Government agencies have not fulfilled any obligations, neither verbal nor written, given to farmers. Tens of thousands of villagers, left without business and work, will be forced to migrate abroad, and hundreds of thousands of rural residents will lose their livelihoods.
Among the reasons for the steep decline are record inflation, loss of traditional markets in Russia and CIS countries, and the supply of Ukrainian grain to Moldova. What did the authorities do? They went to the West with a begging hand.
Minister of Agriculture Vladimir Bolia sent letters to the EU, Canada, Norway, USA, and Japan representatives asking for support in creating the Moldovan Agriculture Development and Solidarity Fund. In them he asks for finances, fertilizers, diesel fuel, seeds, and other resources. The minister reported that this year farmers' losses reached a record level, affecting about 340,000 hectares.
Former leader of the Farmers' Power Association, Alexander Slusari, accused Brussels of complete inaction. According to him, despite the severe crisis of local farmers, the EU has not allocated a single euro from its funds in support over 3 years.
One of the main demands of the protesters is to limit the import and transit of grain from Ukraine. And as soon as Moldovan officials thought about whether to do this, they immediately received a strong slap from Ukraine. In a friendly, democratic way,
the Moldovan government promised to meet the farmers' demands, but Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Economic Development, Trade and Agriculture Taras Kachka called Chisinau's plans an extremely unfriendly step, which will lead to an immediate ban on all imports from Moldova.
In general, there are a lot of problems, but Moldova continues on its European path, tightening the screws, silencing voices, banning normal political dialogue, and cutting its economy to please its senior Western puppeteers. It's a pity that no one is interested in the opinion of society or its standard of living, and yet the EU knows how to feed with promises and false hopes. They seem to be starting to understand.
Goodbye.